collaborative effort. So,
sorry.
so that click OK, so that you feel like you're comfortable giving feedback and saying that's great, but maybe you need to do it slightly differently. So I mean that's the way I try to work. So I don't try and present this is the way it's done. You know your class, you know your pupils, you know what their abilities are. So together we can work out what the best way to engage and excite and provide this learning together. So that's kind of my approach. And at any time, feel very free to be quite straightforward. You're busy, you've got not a huge amount of time, so don't kind of mess about. If things don't quite look right, tell me and I'll do my best to correct them. So yes, that's a bit about me and kind of a bit of a general approach. But the idea for today was to just kind of familiarize you with biomimicry as an approach to learning from nature. So a lot of the time we learn about nature, but biomimicry is slightly different. It's learning from nature. So, well, what can nature teach us, given that nature's had 3.8 billion years of experience in creating a sustainable system? So nature's got a decent track record in innovation and in invention. Let James join us.
Yeah.
Hello, James. Can you hear us?
Morning, James.
Hello, how are you?
Got Zoom updated, okay.
Yeah, just about, sorry. Expect to click a button and get started, but we're all good.
You
Sorry for keeping you.
You joined at exactly the point where we were starting, so you've timed it perfectly.
Perfect, great job.
So I was just saying that over the next hour and a half, we're just kind of introduce biomimicry as an approach to learning from nature. I'm going to look at one method that we can use to learn from nature to address human challenges. So we'll be doing exactly the sort of thing that you might do with pupils. So if you find you can do it, then your pupils can probably do it just as well. So that's what we're going to do over the next hour and a half. And we'll talk a bit about some of the learning you might want to do in your own schools and start thinking about how that might shape up and what you need from myself in terms of helping you to resource that process. So we'll be doing that hopefully in as practical way as possible without you listening to me or without me giving you an hour and a half of a PowerPoint presentation, which I'm sure you don't want. So hopefully you were asked to bring a natural object with you, something from nature. Do you want to hold it up and just show me what you've brought? Pine cone, ooh, a chunk of wood. Oh, some early daffodils, fantastic. What have you got, Catherine? Is that gorse? I can't hear you, Catherine. You're muted, or I've got a feather. Okay, so a nice selection. And what have you got, Karen?
It's green jasper, which partly comes from stromatolite.
Ah, okay. Okay, so I'd just like you to just kind of look at your object, maybe hold it in front of you. You might want to smell it. You have a scent. You might want to just kind of just touch it, see how it feels, the textures of it. You might hold it up to the light to see if does it change color? Is it translucent? Happens when you move it around in the light. And just think to yourself, what does your object do? What's its purpose? Yeah, everything in nature has a purpose and a function. So you look at your object, what's its purpose? What's its function? So if you got the stone like Karen, it might be to lock up carbon or lock up minerals into that piece of rock. But what does your daffodil do, Lucy, or your piece of gorse, or your what does that piece of wood do? What's the function of that piece of wood in the tree?
Just discovered it's for having living creatures crawling out of it, which is nice.
Okay,
this is
habitat.
I think a Scots pine that fell down during the last storm, and we've had it cut up.
suddenly lots of creepy crawlies around Goran, James?
Oh, there's always creepy crawlies in Goran.
Say some more, James. So what does that piece of wood do? What's the function of that for the tree?
Well, it's got to provide strength for the tree.
Strength, yeah, to
It
provide
didn't do a
strength.
very good job. It was rotten through the middle, so that's why you can see there.
Okay.
It's velocity. It protects the tree, so it's got bark on the side, so it's providing protection for the tree.
And how does the bark provide protection?
It protects the wood inside from the elements, protects it from the letting water in.
Okay, so
and also,
it's a water, so it's a waterproof barrier.
yeah. And I suppose it protects other animals, not all the insects from getting in, but some other animals for causing damage to the tree as well. Protects it from the children in school.
Yeah.
They like to say.
Right. So you've got strength and you've got protection. So, so in a way, those are two functions that that piece of wood is doing for the tree.
Yeah.
Lucy, and your daffodils. What's the kind of purpose or function of your daffodils, apart from being beautiful?
Well, I was having a look at it and I thought of two things. It's got, it's very hollow inside the stem part of it. So I'm thinking that's to channel what it needs up to this part. And then that part I would say is for attracting pollinators, because you've got all the little stamens and bits and bobs in there.
Yeah.
So it's actually, looking pretty is part of its purpose in a way.
Well, yeah. Who is it pretty for?
The bees and the little creatures.
And of course, we know that insects have a different UV spectrum of light visibility. So actually, if you look at some plants under UV light, you'll see a different set of colours. On orchids, you'll actually see kind of runway markings that guide the insects into the flower. And yes, it's that function of attraction and also that function of strength in the stem, so that it can push the flowers above the surrounding grass so the bees can get into it. We can talk about why it's hollow in the middle, but maybe not at the moment. But I think there were other reasons why it's hollow in the middle. But then that's a question you can explore. Let's go, Kieran and his feather.
I suppose mainly to help birds regulate their temperature, but also some birds would use it as a means of protection for camouflage. Others, their feathers would be very nice to look at, as opposed to don't know if it have any more unique features because it's bright or colourful. I suppose the big ones maybe if it does help them camouflage. Quite light in the fact that I've got one off them, but if I was holding a ton off them, it'd be quite heavy. So I suppose it's the main ones to regulating the temperature. Very soft, nice to feel. It's a little white one. We have heaps of white ones around the house. My wife gathers them, firm believer, and the message has been sent from her mum. So we've loads of them, and they're all different shapes, sizes, styles. But yeah, quite nice, quite soft to touch. Actually, quite therapeutic. Even just don't think I've ever touched a feather for as long in my life. Actually, it's the past 5 minutes.
Do you know how it regulates temperature? What the strategy is to allow that to happen?
Not really, no.
Okay, so that's something you could explore. I mean, what it does is traps air, and air is less conductive to heat than a solid surface. So because it's trapping the air, it's trapping the heat from the skin in the air with the feather on top. So it's trapping the warmth next to the skin.
Yeah.
In the same way that we mimic that in creating a down jacket, where it's the air that creates the heat, because the air is not as conductive as a kind of a solid material. So yeah, it's regulating temperature. And also it's got that purpose of camouflage, or even in certain birds like peacocks in terms of attraction, in terms of attracting a mate. So that the feathers can have different functions depending upon what the bird wants to do. Oh, somebody waiting to come in. Are you letting them in? Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Right. Gillian, you want to share your object?
I've got a pine cone.
Yes.
I chose it because I like the texture. I find them interesting because whenever they're wet, all the pine bits sort of go up, and then whenever it's dry, it spreads out. I think it protects the seeds inside from temperatures, just different wind and rain, and animals even. And it helps possibly to germinate. Whenever it opens, the seeds will spread, and just liked it.
Oh, it's good that you know that the pine cone is not the seed. The pine cone contains the seeds.
Yes.
And like I say, it opens when it's warm weather and it's dry, and the seeds will fly further away. When it's damp, it closes because the conditions are not ideal for spreading the seeds. And it's using kind of hygroscopic, hydrophobic properties to open based on moisture in the atmosphere. It's quite clever doing that. What else did you say? There's something else. I forget now. But that's pretty good. Yes, so pine cone has that function of kind of opening up and spreading the seeds, and also protection. It protects the seeds from attack before it's ready to spread. Great, thank you. Catherine, I think you're now iPad 10. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Hey, yes, perfect.
Yeah, good. I know I had to change to an iPad. Sorry, myself and technology, okay. Great. I brought this. It's a heather bush. It's very jaggy. So I'm assuming that's to keep things away and keep things out. But it's got a lovely little flower on it as well. And there's a bit of a smell to it, so it's good for the bees and. I don't really know, as a protector, maybe as to prevent wind getting through or to prevent animals or but it's very jaggy.
No, great. The spikes are definitely to protect from birds landing on there and eating away at the berries particularly. And then you got, as with the daffodil, the flowers are attracting pollinators in there to spread the seed. So yes, definitely got that function of protection as well as that function of kind of attraction. So have I missed anybody? Just checking. Yeah, we've got 3 Catherines now, but only two real ones. So right, yeah. So this is a slightly different way of looking at nature. So kind of biomimicry starts with what we can learn from nature, and key to that is thinking about what do things in nature do. So the key in that case will be what is the function. If we're going to use a technical term, is what's the function of things in nature. Just in the way we look at the function of a car is to go from A to B, or to provide comfortable seating for 4 people, or to be able to steer left and right, and a whole range of other functions that a car might have. We can also look at nature in the same way, that nature has a range of functions. And we see, for example, that function of protection with the spikes or with the bark on the tree. We can see there's a relationship between the function that the tree or the spikes are providing on that thistle, I think it's a bit of gorse, and the way that human things also need that function of protection, like protection from impact. If you're riding a bicycle, you might need a helmet. So that idea of a function is this kind of way of thinking about how does nature do things and how we can learn from nature. Sorry, Catherine Leonard, I missed you out. The stone I had was white and looks like a decorative stone. My first thought is insects hide beneath stones, my gardens and forests to help protect them from predators. Yeah, so for the insect, the stone would have that function of protection or kind of providing a habitat. The function of the stone itself, the stones, might be around locking up carbon out of the atmosphere as part of a system. So often in nature, we have things that have a function just individually, like the leaf has the function of converting solar energy into chemical energy. But the stone might have a function as part of a wider system in terms of locking up carbon as part of a carbon cycle, which of course is incredibly useful. Are you able to talk, Catherine, or are you kind of unmiked?
I think she's, yeah, it will be a parallel conversation with Catherine Leonard.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. So biomimicry does two things. So one thing it says, what is the function of something in nature? How does this thing work? Or what does it do, which is what you've just done. Then it also says, well, how does it do that? How does the pine cone open and close depending upon weather conditions? How does the flower provide attraction? How does a flower create color? And not everything in nature creates color out of dyes. Some bird feathers will create color because of their structure, not because of a chemical dye. So key to biomimicry is asking these two questions. So one is, what's the function of the thing in nature I'm looking at? So what does it do? And how does it do that? And is there something I can learn from that? Yeah, so those are, in a way, are the two critical things going on in nature. Oh, Julian's back again.
Teachers work so hard that they need double of themselves.
Okay, so I'm just going to briefly share my screen. Find the right place. Okay, so as I just said, a function is referred to an organism's adaptation or feature which helps it survive. It's what it does. And the strategy is how it does that. How does it meet that particular strategy? So, for example, the function of the feather is to regulate temperature, and it does that by trapping warmth next to the skin. And then we can mimic that in the human terms in the way we create jackets and kind of padded clothing. So biomimicry is an innovation method. It's learning from nature about how to design a thriving, sustainable, human-built world. And the sustainable bit is important because it's not just about designing something because we can do it better. It designs something better which also is sustainable, also works like nature and is sustainable. So it's not just about making a faster spaceship, it's about making a spaceship which is faster but also is perhaps powered in a way which is sustainable, in the way that nature would create energy. So the means is learning from nature, and the goal or the end is a thriving, sustainable human-built world. So in a way, there's lots of functions in nature. Nature does lots of things. So I've just put on the PowerPoint probably about 20 different functions that you might find in nature. So just look at your object again and just kind of think to yourself, well, how many functions does my object deliver out of that list of 20? You might think of ones I've not even got on there yet, but just spend 30 seconds thinking about the different functions that your object provides. Lucy's counting on her fingers. Got to 3, 4. Okay, Lucy, do you want to give us your 5? I think I got 5 or 4.
No, I was thinking more like 15.
Oh, go for it. Go for it.
I wouldn't like to try and explain exactly how, but I don't know. I reckon a lot of them you could kind of relate to any object in a way. You know, like that would provide a bit of shade for something. You know, I can see it casting a shadow on my hand. It's reflecting the light's bouncing off it. It could catch the wind and blow about. It's communicating via colour to bugs. I mean, it changes shape in so much as that it starts off like this and then opens up. Absorbing the light. Well, the green bit is more perhaps. I don't know about protects from attack. I don't know. Like maybe it's not tasty for some things, so they don't want to eat it. It's conveying materials up the stem, holding water. Yeah, basically most of them. I can't think of many that it doesn't do.
Right. Good answer.
Lands gently, maybe. I can't see how it lands gently. But...
Okay. Great, Lucy. Thank you. Anybody else? Kieran, do you want to? What about the feather? How does that fare against Lucy's everything?
I wouldn't have went for as many as that. But there's still quite a lot that it does cover. Catches the wind. Possibly it could communicate by colour, as you said, with the likes of the peacock. As much I'm not just speaking about doing white feather, I suppose. The lands gently, insulates. Don't know about responding. Protects from attack. With the camouflage, some birds would use their feathers for.
Yeah.
Don't know how great it would be at holding water. I suppose it could take a small amount of water, but it would become very heavy.
Yeah.
Shelters. Provide structure. I suppose bird without feathers would look quite strange.
Absolutely. Yeah. The wings wouldn't work.
Yep. So yeah, still quite a lot of them. Transports. Wings again wouldn't work without the feathers. It would be a lot harder to catch flight. I know last week during the storm, I was watching a few birds when I was driving, trying to fly into the wind, and I felt so sorry for them because it just looked like a real tough task.
Yeah, great. Catherine, Gillian, or James, do you want to jump in with anything extra, or do you?
I feel like we're playing top trumps or something. I have to get as many as possible out of it.
No.
I did. Kieran beat me, and Lucy definitely did. It provided some questions as well. I suppose things like it cools and insulates. So I wouldn't know just so much about that for bark. So can it, cool the tree?
It does, but you have to find it out for yourself.
Yeah, no. So as well as there was a good few there, obviously, that it does, but a few questions that would arise that, one thing I was saying about how kind of nutrients and things pass through the tree. It's kind of once you're looking at the tree, it's not as obvious about how things go through it. So I got more questions than answers from looking at it.
Right. But that's often the way, because you look at something that you think is fairly obvious.
Yeah.
And then when you start observing it and kind of think, well, what does it do? You find things and it creates questions. And that's a good bit of research. That's what a designer would do when looking at how to solve a particular challenge. You would often find that the first question you've got is good, but you find a better question, which actually provides more useful information. And that's that whole process of kind of solving a challenge or taking on a design task. It's iterative. It keeps going around in circles. So you get version 1, like the iPhone version 1, but we don't have the iPhone version 1. We're on the iPhone version whatever we're on at the moment. I stopped at 6, I think. But things get better, and that's what designers do. We look at design, we produce something, and then we learn something more. Just as we get better as teachers over the years, I hope. Because we keep improving and getting better. Yeah, and that's again what designers do. We start and we ask better questions, and we find better questions. Great, thank you. Anybody else?
I would agree with James. Well, I would agree with James in that there's so many that you have to question. Does that apply? With mine anyway, it does. It catches the wind. It communicates via color. I'm also wondering. Well, it does insulate. Does it attach temporarily? I wouldn't want to be attached to that. It does. It opens so many questions as well. So I think it's great. Yeah. It's great. It's good. As for the children, I'm thinking for the children, it's great to create discussion there already. Any object, you could look at one of those and say, does that apply? It does open a lot of doors there.
Yeah.
For
discussion.
Yeah. This version you've got now is a version I use with older students or adults. I have differentiated versions for younger students. So, you know, if you're working with low ability groups, and I've got different versions of this.
Very good.
Just so you know. Where was I going to go? Yes, so you could actually start with, can you find something which attaches temporarily? And pupils might go out and look and find cockleburs, teasels that attach to the fur of dogs or passing foxes, which is a way of spreading the seed. So you can start from a function and say, well, what in nature does this function? Or what in nature lands gently? So in NASA, when they're looking at how to land the rover onto the moon, it's got to come down that massive bit of space and land with gravity, but land gently. And you can look at what in nature lands gently, like the seeds of dandelion. How does that do that with a parachute? So you can look at all these sort of strategies. How do cats land gently? They seem to have that ability to land from quite high heights. So you can look, you could take it another way around and say, well, what lands gently that would help us land that rover vehicle on the moon? So you can start from different perspectives. And then the cocklebur is a very classic example which inspired Velcro. That was a Swiss scientist back in 1951 who observed the cocklebur sticking to his dog's fur and looked at the tiny hooks on the cockleburs and saw that could be a way of attaching something temporarily with Velcro. And as primary school teachers, you've seen children's shoes using Velcro because it's really easy to get them on and off. So yeah, especially when they're desperate to go to the toilet. So
Richard,
you can see.
Catherine Leonard put something in the chat about his stone.
Oh, sorry, I can't see the chat at the moment because I've got the.
Okay, so Catherine was saying stone has a lot of the functions. It cools, insulates the insects from different elements, absorbs light, and provides shade. It also shelters.
Yeah, good. I mean, for the stone, that's really part of a whole system, isn't it? It's part of an ecosystem where other organisms are part of that habitat. So with biomimicry, you could look at just the individual function of the feather, which really just benefits the bird. You could look at the whole stone within an ecosystem. So you can look at biomimicry at different levels, the level of kind of form, how things are shaped. You could look at the chemistry of how photosynthesis takes place, that energy is produced within the leaves of the daffodil. So the kind of chemistry of it, or you could look at how it fits into a whole system. Mimicking the form is the simplest, but you could go a bit further than that and look at how everything in nature benefits everything else. So everything in nature is collaborating to create the right conditions conducive for life. Whereas in human products and services, we tend to produce a product that does one thing, or does one thing really well, and does some things quite badly. The iPhone perhaps being an example of something where we have learned from nature, and it has multiple functions, multiple benefits. So that's hopefully giving you a bit of an idea of how, by looking at nature differently, we're starting to get questions about nature and how nature does things and how we can learn from that, how we can start to be designers, innovators, and getting ideas from nature. So what I'd like to do is just share with you in a bit more detail one approach to biomimicry that we've been using with primary school students across Europe, and let you have a go and see what you come up with. And so I'll just run through it on the PowerPoint. So basically called biology to design. So we start with something in biology, like your natural object that you've got, and we think, how could that inspire something in the human built world? How could that help a solution that is beneficial to humans? Or just my video keeps turning on and off. And we do that through these kind of 4 steps. We go and discover something in nature, like you discovered your pine cone. We explore the functions that pine cone delivers and how does it do that? And then we think, well, where in the human world do we want to have something similar? Where do we need in the human world something which opens and closes depending on temperature? So it might be windows in very hot climates. Can they open and close based on temperature automatically without needing to be getting up, closing, and doing it physically? And then we can evaluate that and say, well, is that a successful way to mimic something from nature? So if I'll do this with pupils, I might use a little introduction like this. I might talk about innovation inspired by nature, and I might think that everything inventors make starts with an idea. So everything in the classroom that we've got started with an idea somewhere. So inventors start with ideas. We don't need to worry too much about being practical all the time. We can be really innovative and creative in this. So it's not just about being practical. It's about what can we imagine that we might want to invent. So everything inventors make starts with an idea. And where do inventors get their ideas from? Lots of places. Often they get ideas from how things work in nature. Think about the bullet train in Japan and how that was inspired partly by the kingfisher's beak in terms of redesigning that. That was engineers observing something in nature and then applying that to a challenge that they had with the bullet train in Japan. And then, it's your turn. Find something in nature that impresses you. What's it good at doing? This is a flying squirrel. What's it good at? It's good at gliding from high treetops down to the ground. Probably not going to find this in Gava, but I haven't edited this for Northern Ireland yet. And then, in what situations do we also want to be good at that same thing about gliding from a high place to a low place? It might be that, we want to get from the top of a high mountain down to the bottom as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So what do we do? How can we learn from the flying squirrel? There we go. Base jumping. I think the Health and Safety Council might have a few concerns about doing that as a school activity, but you can see it's a really clear example of how we look at how a flying squirrel glides. If we want to do the same thing, we can mimic that. We can learn from how the squirrel glides and how we can mimic that in a human design challenge. That might make this particular person's life better. The way this works on 5 easy steps. So firstly is go find something in nature. And I'm going to ask you to do this with your objects in pairs. But find something in nature. Draw your organism. This is a cat. In your case, you've got it in front of you, so don't worry about drawing it. And then list all the features, attributes, or behaviors related to your organism. So if I'm looking at a cat, I might think it's got a sharp tongue, it's got retractable claws, it's got reflecting eyes. It's also got the fur, the tail, the joint on the legs, the ears pointing in a certain direction. Again, just observing that particular organism in a huge amount of detail. Most people can get at least 20 or 25 details when they really start to look in detail. And as soon as you get over the initial kind of, it's got legs and ears and a nose, suddenly you find it's got 6 whiskers, not 3 whiskers. It's got eyes of a certain color. There's lots of detail you can observe. So once you've done that, then, well, what do these features do for the organism? What do the retractable claws do? It enables a cat to climb, to hold on, to fight, to walk on slippy surfaces. The reflective eyes boost night vision. The textured tongue allow the cat to brush and clean its skin, to grip food. So you can do some research into some of these features, the ones that you're interested in. So there's a very good bit of research, and it ties into biology here. And it's also inquiry-based learning. From that, you can think of, well, what ideas does that make me think of? So what else needs to grab to hold on, which is retractable? So a Japanese inventor created retractable thumbtacks. So rather than the push pins that you put in your pocket and sit on later, these push in and then they retract when you pull them out. You can buy them on Amazon. They've never been a top seller, but they were created. Cat's eyes, of course, on roads. We've seen cat's eyes. It's mimicking the exact way a cat's eye actually works, reflecting the light back out to increase visibility at night. And in the cat's tongue, they've created kind of brushes inspired with the same patterning to help remove the balling up of cat's fur. So you can start by looking at something like a cat and say, well, what does it do? What's its features? How it does that? And how does that make me think of something that humans might also want to be able to do? So that's a kind of an approach to biomimicry. I'm going to stop sharing. Oh, Nicola's just entered, so we'll just let her in. So what I'm going to ask you to do for, let's say, 10 minutes, I'm going to put you into pairs, hopefully, if I can get the right Catherines together. And then maybe with your objects together, just think about 1 or 2 features of your object. Think about what those features do for the object. And then what ideas might that make you think of in terms of human design, or something that might be beneficial for humans or might apply to the human built world? Okay, and there's no right or wrong answers. In terms of ideas, we love creativity. The wackier, the wilder the ideas, the better. You never know, you might just invent the next big thing. Okay, so I'm going to give you 10 minutes, then we'll come back and we'll do some feedback if I can work out how to put you into breakout rooms. Okay, so I'm going to sign manually. 4 rooms. Catherine, Leonard, and Kieran will be in 1 room. I'm then going to put, excuse me, James and Gillian in a room. And then I'm going to put, what I've got is iPad and Lucy in a room. So I think that's 6 different people, 2 people in each room. Okay. And I'll give you 10 minutes and I'll send you a message when you've got 2 minutes left. So look at your object, think about the key features, think about how those features are delivered and how they might inspire some idea for you. Okay? We'll see if anybody's left.
Catherine, there's a second, she came in on a second implement, so I'm not sure.
I'll stick her into room 1 anyway.
Okay, to
Catherine. Where she'll be with herself.
That's always helpful. It avoids a split personality.
Yes. Oh, sorry I'm late. I had a mother emergency. Anyway.
Okay.
Is everything okay?
It's all okay now. Yeah. Anyway, that's just what happens, isn't it? You know, we've just got to, there's some things we just can't get around. So yeah, anyway, it'll be fine.
So just whilst they're in there doing their task, so I massively run on deliberately. Because you weren't here at the beginning, Nicola. So we're yeah, I ran over deliberately and went into more stuff. So how do you want to run it, Karen? Because you still want to finish at about 11 o'clock, so you can do some bits and pieces.
Yeah, I mean, they have to 11:30, although in my message it said we'll probably be more towards 11. So we have that half-hour flexibility. I mean, my bit won't take, I just want to quickly show them, just tell them about the Nature's Got Talent. So the voting form, and then Chris has sent me the draft 1-minute video this morning. So it's a bit of a draft, but just to show them that. So that literally take 5 minutes, and then talk about the outdoor classroom day stroke introduction to biomimicry at the school. Yeah, I'll probably just need 10 minutes.
Okay. So
well, I was only doing 15 minutes anyway, wasn't I, Rich? So
yeah, do you want to kind of whiz through that in 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. So after we've done the feedback in the groups, it's just good to get, because I've not really talked about too many examples. I've not used a PowerPoint very much because it's a small group. So it'd be good to then just see a few examples quite quickly. I think that would help kind of cement some of the things I've been doing.
Yeah.
Cool. Then we'll go back onto the actual kind of structure of the potential program. So I didn't give them a Padlet link. Never mind.
Yeah. No, I'm delighted the 5 were able to turn up. You just never know with teachers and schools. So we only had 1 apology from. So yeah. So 5 out of the 6 are here.
I mean, I find with schools, you know, things happen, emergencies happen all the time, and
which is why
things get done, but they get done in that kind of teacher's world, which we just don't understand.
Yeah.
Or we know a little bit, and we know it's busy, but we just don't know everything that's going on.
Which is why I'm delighted 5. I really was aiming for 1 or 2 would have been success at this point. So yeah.
I think they're delighted probably to be given the chance to, you know, participate in something like this as well. I mean, that's what we find when we're doing like the road shows and stuff. Like the teachers that get to come along, they're just like, oh, this is great, you know. I mean, it's one less lesson that they have to plan. And it's like they're being given some input as well. So yeah, I think that they like to be, you know, given something different, because otherwise it's just the same old as well, isn't it? So it kind of breaks the routine for them.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's good that Catherine and was it Jim were kind of creating the questions. I found really useful.
Yeah.
That kind of getting questioned and making you look in more depth. That's a particular skill you get in working scientifically, which is in the primary curriculum. Anything that gets kids to ask questions, I think, is good stuff.
Catherine, so the Catherine that Catherine Bow on the iPad, she is very, very interested in STEAM. So that's her speciality and her kind of real interest. So I'm not surprised, you know, that this is her passion in terms of kind of design and science. And James too. So James has already kind of tried biomimicry in his school. So just interesting, both of them were responding in that way.
Yeah. I like that Lucy wrote in the chat, my cat lands like a brick.
Oh, see, I can't see the chat. That's the trouble when if you come late, you don't get to see the original chat. So, but
yeah, we were just talking about, Richard was just talking about landing softly and how cats land. And yeah, Lucy put in the chat, well, my cat doesn't land softly. It's a bit fat.
We're also talking about how you can start from the function like land softly, and NASA with the lunar rover. Well, how do we land that onto the moon surface softly? And what in nature lands softly, like the dandelion with the parachutes and some of the insects and cats, how they land, and can we use that to create a way of landing that lunar rover softly? So you can start from the insect or the object, or you can actually just start from a function and branch out from there.
Same line that David's on. That's looking like that's his wanting to cushion something to land softly.
Yeah.
An egg. Well, he should use the eggs. They're not too messy.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think we should go eggs, full on eggs.
and that's part of the fun. When it does land messily, well, you clean it up. You know, it's not a big problem.
I remember a big lesson for me. So with our Forest Youth Club, it's been about 3 or 4 years ago. We kind of gave them each in pairs an egg at the beginning of the session, and they had to protect this egg throughout the 3 hours, whatever else we did, but the egg had to be protected. And so they had to kind of work out how to protect the egg and work together and so on. But there was one pair right halfway through, and something happened, and the egg fell and broke. And the devastation of this, because they had built up a relationship. You know, we were trying, you know, in a sense of care and protect, and they were totally, and I hadn't, I suppose, kind of realized the level of grief that was going to create, because the experiment had worked so well for them. So that was a big lesson about.
Yeah. Well, you've got a little teachable moment there about, you know, how do we care for things and how do we deal when things don't always work out the way we want them to.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, these moments are often, you try and teach them, you kind of create scenarios, but when it actually really happens, it might not be on lesson, but actually that's
it's a major, really interesting kind of something to happen to you about loss.
When people do that to me, I just boil the egg first and then get on with it.
Well, there was a few stealing eggs. There was a few kind of stealing your eggs. What's human behavior.
Well, you could subcontract your egg guard into somebody else more competent. I'll do your homework if you look after my egg. All sorts of strategies.
It reminds me, in Ecuador, they have a similar kind of passing the tomato, where they put it under their chins and you have to pass it to the next person under their chins. And, you know, and it's that same kind of splat tomato.
Is that a cherry tomato?
No, it'd be slightly more challenging.
You can do it with a durian.
That's a lot bigger.
And you know how a durian protects itself. And it's very, very spiky. Yeah. That wouldn't be so comfortable, I don't think.
under your chin.
The stakes are much higher in that situation.
Richard keeps disappearing.
And I'll probably change my little webcam because the connection's getting a bit dodgy. If I just breathe on it, it turns off. Okay, I'm going to send them a last minute warning. Oh, okay, I'm going to close the room in a minute's time. So we'll do a quick kind of show and tell, and then I'll hand over to you, Nicola, to do the lots of examples. And I guess we can PDF the presentation so we can send that to them later. If the teachers want to look at more stuff, they can in their own time. And same with my presentation, I can send that to you, Karen, and you can share that with them.
Yeah. And we're
again, they'll get a lot of this kind of. Okay, on.
No, I was just going to say to Nicola, we're recording the session too.
Yeah, I saw. That's great. I'll be able to watch. I'll be able to watch the bit that I missed.
If I can find it.
No, it's fine.
Right, I'm going to close them down. It's going to be quite brutal because there's no warning, so they'll all get thrown back in. Okay, 3, 2, 1.
You just gave them the 1 minute warning.
Oh no, it closes in 60. It does give them 60 seconds. It's not quite brutal.
Yeah.
And it's always interesting in terms of people coming straight back in and hanging on.
Yes. Who really didn't like it and came back quick.
Not that we can read too much.
We just were so quick. we have it all sorted.
James was staying on his own for a while then. Close that down. Great, so that was 10 minutes. That was really rushed. If I'm doing this with a group of primary school kids, I might do this over 2 or 3 hours, taking them outside, doing things, you can really delve into each element of this, but this was a very quick taster. Would anybody like to just kick off and share what they, iPad, Catherine, I think it is.
No, Lucy and I were talking about daffodils. We're talking, is Lucy back there? Is she?
I'm here.
Yeah, there you are. We were talking about the daffodil and we were talking about how the stem's curved at the top. We were really thinking, what the attractive flower at the top of it, what would it be used for? And, it's nearly like a target to attract someone. And we were also looking then at the windbush as well, and possibly thinking the flower and the scent of the flower, and what could it be used? Why is it attractive? And what could we possibly make from that? And we were thinking even, could we have scented clothes? Instead of spraying perfume on our clothes, could we possibly have scent?
Yeah.
But then we weren't sure why that we were looking at the spikes as well, and how this sort of has a twofold properties where it attracts with the flowers, but it also repels because of the spikes. So we weren't sure what we could use that for.
Yeah. I'm thinking of spikes on a backpack if I'm on a crowded train. To stop people from pushing against me.
Yeah. With your scented clothes on.
Yeah. Or unwanted attention from people on the train. The spikes come out.
Yeah, you want them. But no, it's very interesting discussion just to look more closely at the object and think how we could adapt them and what they could be used for in our lives.
Great, thank you. Somebody else want to jump in with their discussion?
Yeah, so we and Catherine and I, we were able to talk loads about what it has already been used for, what the qualities or functions of it, but in terms of coming up with some breakthrough, innovative idea that was going to make us millionaires, we just couldn't really come up with anything. I suppose what we said about when we were talking quite a lot about Catherine's stone and stones in general, we said about how a stone on its own is completely different to like a stone crushed into hundreds of different pieces, or one stone in a yard might not be much use, but if you have a large group of stones all together, it can be good for keeping weeds out. We talked quite a lot about how stones, no matter how long they're left out in bad weather conditions, they've obviously got qualities that keep them good. They stay attractive. They don't wear and tear away like a lot of other things would do in the elements. So we spoke about like how then types of stones used for headstones and graveyards. And more so, and then to talk about back as far as Stone Age and cavemen and how they use stone for absolutely everything. And then probably realised that it's maybe not the best thing in terms of using all stone for weapons because you have the weight involved. But so we kind of talked about how they've been used already as opposed to how we could then use it again, because I think especially stone's quite a common one. Stone has been used and probably will continue to be used for some of its qualities. But Catherine and I just weren't sure to get the breakthrough idea this time, but it'll come.
But you have that kind of divergent thinking, lots of ideas come in. And that's often the process. You go, and then you look at those ideas in a week's time, you start to kind of sift them a little bit or filter them or add use a criteria, and then you kind of converge into something, which might then start to be as an idea coming, and then you might diverge out again and kind of do a bit more research. That's often the way you're doing research. You're kind of diverging, converging all the time as you slowly work towards that millionaire creating idea, whatever it might be. But in 10 minutes, that's pretty good. Gillian and James? Any millionaire ideas?
Well, yeah, Gillian has one. I don't know if we can share it with anybody, just in case the patent is pending on it. So we're not sure if we want to share the information. She was looking at her pine cone and the idea of it opening and closing depending on the weather conditions. And she is going to design a clothesline that when you put your clothes out, it'll open up. Your clothes will dry when it's sunny, and then when the rain comes, you know they're safe. They're in. So I haven't negotiated my percentage cut of it yet. I don't know if I had much input, but it's definitely a winner.
I've never heard that one before. A completely novel idea.
Make sure and copyright that, Gillian. Just make it loud and clear. If you put it on recording, that's copyrighted Gillian's idea.
That's it, yeah.
Otherwise, I'm taking it.
But what you would do with something like that as a creator is, okay, I've got an idea and I can sketch it. I need to go and talk to an engineer now. Well, how would I build that? And you might talk to different types of engineers. So biomimicry is definitely about collaborating, and there's no sense that you need to understand everything.
It's great that I'm married to an engineer.
Yeah, great. So you've got the creativity. You've learned from nature. You might have the biology coming in there, but then you might need the engineer or the technical person coming in. You need to work out the maths of that and the science. And of course, you've got the whole kind of marketing of your idea and the creativity, the arts and the media. So in terms of thinking about integrating this with STEM or STEAM teaching, just in that one idea, you can bring in all those different elements and you create the kind of collaborative team. You might even go to a local university and say, could you build us one of these? And we're going to test it out and, do prototypes. You've got terms worth of work if you want to go crazy on it, but you've got something you can actually see being a real innovation in the real world. So in terms of real world learning, that's a fantastic idea. You could see that in your back garden.
And Richard was going to comment just really briefly that I think we'd said last time we all met that when the children start getting involved in this process and coming up with potential ideas, we could kind of then contact a local engineering firm or University of Ulster and just bring them in on board and just say, look, we've got this great idea. Would you love to work with the children about how we could kind of take this to this next phase? So it just builds that partnership and relationships between the schools and local organizations and companies.
Yeah, and most people who get a letter from a bunch of 9-10-year-olds do tend to respond. So, great. And it's the pupils feeling that kind of sense of empowerment of doing that themselves and getting a response and finding that collaboration. I'm gonna shut up for a while because that's the kind of an introduction to biomimicry and the kind of creativity and one approach to biomimicry. I'm going to hand over to Nicola, who's magically appeared. and she might say a few words about herself for those who haven't quite met her before, and then Nicola would perhaps talk a bit more about some kind of the biomimicry examples that are out there in the real world. Nicola.
Hello, everybody. First, I want to apologize for my tardiness. I had a mother emergency. So anyway, so it'll all be good. So a bit about myself. I have probably been speaking and teaching about biomimicry for about 15 years. I've spent the last 20 years working in the Ecuadorian Amazon. So I've always had this kind of like deep connection to the natural world. So I'm just, as I hear we're running a little bit behind time, so I'm just going to like fly through a very quick presentation. And I know a couple of you already are quite familiar with biomimicry, so I'm sure there's a lot of it. And I did just want to kind of like bring in on this brilliant pine cone invention to do check out in Melbourne, Australia. They have built a facade on a building, which is exactly doing that. It's opening and closing depending on the weather. And so the building has already kind of incorporated that into its siding. So yeah, it's seeing these actually, moving into real life examples. But the washing line, I think that's an absolute winner. So let me just share my screen with you. Right, come on. Okie dokie, you can all see that. So yeah, thumbs up. So yeah, nature as teacher, we know it to be. So I'm just going to say, flick through. Whenever I start a presentation, I always ask this question, what is nature? And most people, Catherine, do you want to put yourself on mute? Catherine Leonard. Thank you. And they'll point to the green bit, that's not just children, that's adults too. You ask what's nature, and immediately it's the forest, it's the park, it's where we go on holiday. And this fundamental disconnect that we've forgotten that humans are just another species on this planet and we are nature. In fact, I was recently asked, they're writing a new definition for nature for the dictionary, because in the dictionary, humans are not included in the definition of nature. So we're looking for a new definition. I was asked if I would ask some of my contacts in the Amazon, some indigenous people, what their definition of nature is. And they couldn't understand the question, which would be a little bit like asking a fish, what's water? So just really kind of reiterating that point, that remembering that, we are all a part of it. And we often so kind of fall into this, nature's about competition, where actually it's a lot more about cooperation. And bringing in that point about, it's not about survival of the fittest, it's about survival of what fits in, about adaptation and about cooperation. And all around us, we have these ecosystem services that are happening without us really, most of the time, being aware of the parts that they're playing. So just to hear from you, because I missed that first 10 minutes. So what does biomimicry mean to you? To just kind of like hear some of you. So I know some, Karen and Richard were saying you're following, really interested in the STEAM. And so I'm sure biomimicry kind of comes into that. But what's your definitions of biomimicry? A couple of people want to share with me. Anyone?
I suppose it's looking at nature and trying to see how nature does something and then recreating that in our own lives to see, can it make our lives any better?
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else?
I think the little slogan that was being used was something like "Nature did it first," and I think it was one Karen maybe had used, and I think I've just stuck with that. The biomimicry is nature did it first. There's so many things from nature that probably even going back 30, 40, 50 years. And some of the innovations we have now that we treat as every day and like part of what we've always known probably did come from nature at some point of view. So I think that quote of nature did it first, that's all I kind of keep associating with biomimicry anytime I'm trying to remind myself what exactly it is. But I'm still relatively uneducated with it. So in terms of creating my own definition, I think it's a struggle.
Thank you. Well, I mean, the phonetics of just breaking it down of bio and mimic, copying nature. But I like to give this definition. Janine Benyus is really one of the people that really kind of put biomimicry on the map. And her definition is biomimicry is the technology of biology. It's making a fiber like a spider or lassoing the sun's energy like a leaf. And she says it's the conscious emulation of life's genius and a survival strategy for the human race, a path to a sustainable future. The more our world functions like the natural world, the more likely we are to endure on this home that is ours, but not ours alone. And it has a 3.8 billion year head start. So it is the ultimate research and development department. But that word also gets confused with biomorphism, bioutilization, bioassisted. And, to kind of just clarify, biomorphism, it might be this kind of bare slipper. It hasn't got anything to do with sustainability. It can look like nature. Bioutilization, it could be tree plantations, it can be sustainable, or then again, it can be over-harvesting. Bioassisted, again, in gardening, we've either got natural plant breeding or GMOs. But biomimicry or bio-inspired, where what we're talking about is sustainability is the objective. It's not making a whole load of gadgets just because we can. To keep that focus on, why do we want to do this? Because we want to learn how to be wiser with material use and energy and everything else. And it's shifting our perception away from learning about to learning from. So, we're so stuck in that, what's the Latin name and what are its uses? And instead actually looking at it and saying, well, actually, how can we learn from the tree, not just about it? So we break down into these three areas of form, process, and ecosystem. And I'm sure most of you are aware of the classic kingfisher and the bullet train, how its beak inspired that. The process, I love you try and get a mussel or a limpet off of a rock. And if you ask a human to stick something, we use toxic petrochemical glues. So what's the process that those oysters and mussels and limpets, what are they using as a natural glue? What is that protein chain? And that has been discovered, and it is currently, being used as this amazing natural glue. And then moving out into ecosystem and seeing how it all functions together. What is that cooperation all about? And I'm sure you all know what this one is. Oh, Zephyr sound. Just have some shout outs. The best known, most commercially successful instance of biomimicry is...
Did that 20 minutes ago.
Buy it. Exactly. I mean, but the problem is yes, NASA made it famous and we've got it in everything. It's not sustainable. It's made out of petrochemicals. So we've taken the first part, but it doesn't do what a seed head does. It doesn't just dispose back down into the ground. An owl. Did you cover an owl? What's the owl superpower? Anyone can think of what's been invented from an owl? Lucy?
Is it to do with the shape of their face? Reminds me of a kind of a satellite dish or something similar.
It could be. I haven't heard that one, but not saying it's not. Anyone else got any other ideas? What invention?
Is it to do with like night vision goggles or something and being able to see at night?
That can be one of them. But one of what I'm thinking of are the new wind turbine blades. Because of the noise, these massive, massive turbines. So they've looked at the edge of how and why does an owl fly silently? You know, what's different about an owl's wings to other birds' wings? And so this adaptation that they have made to it's not the leading edge, the trailing edge of the blade to actually cut down that noise. Coral reefs, anyone? What has been a great inspiration from people studying coral reefs? It's like the quick fire test here, you know. No takers? So if we think of that, you know, it's just building itself out of thin air and thin water. It's not shipping in concrete from the other side of the world to build its structure. How is it actually building itself on site? And there's a company, Forterra, it used to be called Caldera, and they have worked out by studying the coral, using CO2 and turning that back into calcium carbonate and turning it into a building material. Just like the coral absorbs CO2 and it, through the mineralization, through the conversion plant, it actually creates its own body. And how amazing would that be if we actually had, you know, we were able to have locations where instead of the destructive practice of making cement, we could actually learn from the coral. Butterflies, so much to learn from butterflies. Anybody got any ideas? What have we learned from butterflies? No, well, there's a lot that can be said from butterflies. But one of the amazing things is how they are learning, how they heat themselves. You know, they're amazing little solar panels, really. And they're all nanotechnology. They're very light. They don't use much material. When you compare that to one of our solar panels, it's very heavy, it uses a lot of material. But also they've noticed that at 17 degrees is how a butterfly holds its wings. That generates the most amount of heat. So it needs to warm up to be able to fly off. So they don't just hang out in any position. You can see in that bottom right picture how that 17-degree angle. So what does that mean for the repositioning of, you know, solar panels to make them more efficient? And Exeter University have been doing loads of amazing studies on this, on how we improve the efficiency of solar cells. Transportation, ants, you know, they don't have traffic jams, and you can have millions of ants, but they don't come to a standstill. So they've looked at these algorithms to say, well, what can we learn through to stop these crazy traffic jams that we're experiencing? What do the ants do? Why don't they have a traffic jam? They help each other cross bridges or cross obstacles, but they all slow down together. They don't overtake each other. It's not this kind of, and that way of all of them slowing down together means that they keep moving, but without kind of creating this jam. And slime molds, I mean, this, for a long time in Japan, they've been doing a lot of studies. You know, we still kind of, many people think of it as from the fungi kingdom, but it is a totally different kingdom. And there's an intelligence there without a brain. It can make its way through mazes, you know, quicker than anything. This is a mapping of the Tokyo transport system. The slime mold could find its way in the quickest way between hubs, between centers, which is the best way to actually, you know, move people around. After what they did in Japan, the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, have done the same. So it's like, okay, can we look at transport systems, how to make them more efficient? What about the Venus flower basket sponge? Any takers? What has that inspired? Amazing lattice work, this amazing strength.
It reminds me of the Gherkin building.
Exactly, you are correct, Lucy, it is. So that's exactly what the architects mimicked. We shouldn't be calling it the Gherkin. If anyone goes to London, next time you look at it, oh look, there is the Venus flower basket sponge building. You know, it's just a little bit longer, but actually that's more correct. Yeah, and so there's been many buildings and a lot of architecture that has been based, you know, on going back to Crystal Palace and, you know, the origin of the giant Amazon water lily, through to building structures that don't have internal columns, looking at the sea urchins, and then also, you know, this very famous biomimetic example of the termite mounds, which keep themselves at an even temperature. And, you know, that's an incredible energy saving. You know, modern buildings would have an aircon in every single room, but by mimicking that and creating a structure that doesn't need heating and cooling. But sometimes it can seem really high tech, all of the biomimicry gadgets, and but I like to remind us that also look at the beavers and the dams and how their dams do so much. Not only do they prevent flooding and improve water quality, increase biodiversity and habitat, there are these really real life examples. And I've actually built a load of leaky dams myself, learning from the beavers to improve habitat where I'm living. And also this working together, the geese. I mean, this is an amazing finding that they discovered when they fly in formation, they can fly 70% farther than they could if they're flying alone. What does that mean as well? So it's good to kind of look at biomimicry and all those different, we've got the forms, we've got the process, we've got the systems, and that communication and all those other kind of layers of looking at the natural world. But this is the classic, you know, at the moment we're dealing with this crazy waste, this human-made waste, but then we look at nature's waste and we've got leaves and bluebells and shells. That's nature's rubbish. And we look at our current madness of this single-use fossil fuel-based rubbish, where nature's doing exactly the same thing with its own packaging. No, it even tells you when it's ready. So, you know, we're doing the same things. It's just that shift that we need. And when we start looking at, well, what does that mean as far as, you know, really closed loop systems? It's a win-win situation. This is a beer company. It doesn't just sell beer, because the old way would be make beer and the rest of it's a waste product. But what about turning that waste product into something else? And then you end up with all these other products that you can sell at the same time. So economically, it makes sense as well. And, you know, and that's just bringing it really simply back into the schools when we're, you know, there is no such thing as waste. We know that we can't send it away. And so the more we can be teaching this of the transformation of food waste to compost to food, and really seeing that cycle as complete is like a really simple example. So I'm just going to stop sharing there. And that's just kind of given a quick overview of, you know, some of the things that you will already be aware of and some other kind of examples in a quick mini download. Over to you, Richard.
Great, thank you, Nicola. So we will make sure we'll share these presentations with you afterwards so you can go through, especially Nicola's slides, because they're very rich with information and things you might want to dig in a bit more. I'm aware of time. I'm also aware that we're going to meet you all in May, and we need, especially in May, to really start thinking about some planning and what we're going to do with the schools. So again, I wanted to share a quick presentation looking at how we might resource this in schools and how this might look like in terms of a very broad overview of a kind of a teacher plan or a scheme of work. So I can share my screen. Great. So some of you will have seen this suggestion already, but we start with looking at nature differently. So kind of developing those skills of observing nature, looking at nature, and really kind of asking questions and developing our skills and looking at nature from a different perspective, as we've been doing today. Then think about, well, what can we design based on nature? What can we be inspired by when we look at nature differently? As we did with the activity we've done today, we looked from biology to design ideas. Then we might think about, well, how can we use that to address a particular challenge that we face in our community, our homes, or somewhere within Garver? So how can we take this way of learning from nature and apply it to a particular challenge that we might have, like how can we prevent classrooms overheating in summer weather? So how can we use nature as a way of finding a solution? And then we might go and design a solution, prototype it, test it, as Karen was saying, even get help from local universities or engineering firms to build a prototype. And then the idea is that in, I think, May next year, there'll be a design fair where pupils from the schools, teams, and people from the community share their ideas. I'm not sure it'll be as grand as this design fair in the picture, but it might be more grand, who knows? So there's a way of kind of sharing this within the community. So again, good design is collaborative. You share, you learn from each other. I just want to go through those in a bit more detail. So to give you an idea of what we might do. So that kind of looking at nature differently. We might start on the top left-hand corner, doing a little kind of webbing game, so seeing how all things in nature interconnect, how nature is an interconnected system. We might use different activities like blindfold touching of nature to explore nature with our tactile senses, to understand the functions of bark by really feeling it and feeling the prickliness. We might use smells to look at nature in terms of our auditory factors and what does nature smell like and how do different scents in nature. In fact, we might collect colours in nature, look at how colour is an indicator in the natural world, or how colours are created. We might, in the bottom left-hand corner, just spend time sitting and observing our feelings when we're in nature, how our emotions are affected by being in nature. We might do some activities by, standing on a box of eggs and wonder, why don't the eggs break? What is it about the way the eggs are designed that spreads the weight and that, when we can stand on a box of eggs, they don't break? And how is that mimicked in engineering? So there's some very simple science experiments we could do, taking natural objects and exploring how they deliver their functions, like the strength of an egg. We might use that to then create towers made of spaghetti, using the shape of an egg to create more stronger towers by creating a better form rather than adding more mass to make it heavier or stronger. And we might do that activity with looking at the different functions of your objects in the bottom right-hand corner and going out and collecting as many objects and examples of different functions in nature, really get pupils to observe natural objects in more and more detail. And that, I'm just writing some learning objectives and outcomes here. So it's about pupils using a range of techniques to observe natural objects, natural organisms, developing a sense of curiosity, to express how they feel in nature. So creating a language to talk about what nature means to them and understanding that nature, everything in nature has a purpose and use the different strategies to achieve that purpose. And learning outcomes, demonstrating the ability to observe nature, asking questions, sharing their feelings, discussing how nature inspires different things. And this is all about reconnecting. So there's three big kind of purposes around biomimicry. And one is about reconnecting with nature. As Nick was saying, we are of nature. We're not with nature or next to nature, we are of nature. So really reconnecting with that sense of we are of the natural world. And then we might do that design activity that we did, biology to design, where we find an organism, something that we find interesting, curious. We might draw it in as much detail as we can. We might then identify the different elements or features on that insect. We might then try to understand, well, what do each of those features do for the organism? And then look at, well, how might those features inspire something useful for human design? And then we might start creating some simple design ideas based on that. So that's the biology to design activity that we did this morning. And I can give you a scheme of work for that, and I can provide you with those sorts of resources and the PowerPoint presentation so you can guide students through that process, and I give you some worksheets and things so we can resource that quite in quite a lot of detail. And again, it's about helping pupils to observe, draw, and identify features of an organism, to find out what those features do for the organism, to create ideas for human designs based on the organism. So lots of good inquiry-based learning skills being developed. And so producing drawings, labeling their chosen species, discussing what those features are, creating a human design, and discussing how nature has inspired that. So that's kind of very much an inquiry-based learning approach, getting pupils to lead that learning and be inspired by what they find. So and partly in that there's this kind of ethos idea that you can also discuss about what is it useful that we should be designing. You know, so biomimicry is about designing things which help the planet flourish for all species. So should we be using this to design? The classic is people look at wood lice, then design armor for soldiers. Is that a good use of design and innovation, or should we be using this for creating things which are more in harmony with more peaceful innovations? So there's a question in biomimicry about, are we designing something which makes the world better for all species, or are we doing it in a way which is just about creating money? So the ethos is quite a strong thing in biomimicry, and we can introduce that at this stage. Then I've got some questions. So in stage 3, we could move on to a biomimicry challenge. So is there something in your school or an idea that's come from the pupils in stage 2, which they'd like to take further in terms of designing a real innovation? So could we take something that they've already thought about? Could we find a new challenge based on a local issue, or could we offer some challenge to pupils? For example, how to keep buildings cool in hot weather. The challenge with this is that a lot of the resources for biomimicry design is quite technically advanced in language. So when I use it with pupils, it's about, even 13 is a bit of a stretch, 13 and above for a lot of the resources you can find online. So there's a challenge around resourcing some of this, and I'll come to that in a second. But just kind of, if you look at, sorry, there's 2 approaches to biomimicry. There's biology to design, which is what we just did this morning. There's also challenged biology, where we take a challenge like keeping buildings cool in hot weather, and we look to biology for answers. And that process is quite complex. So we take a challenge, we understand the context of that challenge, we look at what functions your design solution will need to do. We need to find the research questions that we're going to answer. We need to go into nature and look at examples of those functions. We need to abstract the design principles. It's quite complex and difficult. It's not impossible to do it with primary school students. I'm just saying, if we did it in a very open way, it'd be very difficult to resource that. If we picked particular examples like keeping cool in hot weather, we could find insects in the local environment that do that. We can find birds that do that. And we could resource examples of other species which pupils might want to interrogate. And we could provide resources in appropriate language for the age group. But if we went online and did that sort of research on insects that could help us to keep cool in hot weather, the language is going to be way above the ability of most upper primary school pupils. So there's a bit of a question about how we do this. Not whether we do it or not, but there's a question about how we do that and resource that effectively. So that's something we probably need to discuss in May when we come face to face. So we could pick 3 to 4 simple challenges and we could resource that for you. So that's a bit of a question. So when we've done stages 1 and 2, there's this kind of open question of how we want to develop that forward. And I think we probably need to kind of be a bit iterative on that and make that decision as we get into the process, rather than trying to answer those questions now. So again, it's about pupils learning to search information relevant to their designs, about abstracting ideas from nature, it's about using their research to improve their design or produce their design. The outcomes in terms of explaining what their product does, researching different organisms, producing drawings, explaining how their organisms influence their design. So there's lots of good learning in that. And here we've got the ethos again in terms of choosing what's appropriate to design. But also at this point, we're really emulating nature. We're mimicking how nature does stuff. We've got that kind of third part of the biomimicry trinity: the reconnect, the ethos, and then the emulating nature or mimicking nature. Stage 4, kind of to be determined. It depends how far you want to go with this. Do you want to start prototyping, building models? If you're looking at insulation and overheating, you might start looking at different insulation types and testing them, putting them outside with thermometers and seeing which one stays the coolest, or wrapping an ice cube up and seeing how long it takes the ice cube to melt. So you can do some quite nice science around some elements of your challenges. Again, it depends upon how much you want to go into this, how much curriculum time you've got available. So these are questions we need to explore in a bit more depth, and I'd need to have that feedback from you. But these are just some design drawings that actually older pupils have produced to give you an idea of the sorts of things that pupils might start producing drawings to show how they've used the honeycomb structure in creating buildings, or they're using different ideas from nature in designing furniture, or just looking at creating an integrated food system that creates its own fertilizer. So they might start coming up with simple drawings to illustrate their design ideas, and that might be enough. That might be good enough. Or you might want to say, well, how can we build a prototype of that? How can we provide an example? And the last stage is this idea for a design fair to kind of the pupils to present their ideas. So to be able to critique their own and the others' ideas, to understand how a range of ideas and filter out the best ideas, to assess which ideas are the best in terms of sustainability. So can they present their solution? Can they explain their solution? Can they provide suggestions to others? Can they use tools to simply assess what they've done, to kind of reflect on their learning? So lots of kind of very good kind of skills and competence in that. And this is very much, just a suggestion. So either way, we work through the kind of 5 stages, and I appreciate you want time to reflect on this and discuss this in more detail when we do some planning in May. I'm suggesting that those first 2 stages, that kind of using nature, getting more reconnected with nature, using our senses, and start using that biology to design approach as we've done today, might be something we do through the autumn term. And you could probably do that in 4 to 5 hours. You might have to stretch it a bit further. It all depends on how much you want to build that in and how many kind of relevant curriculum links you're finding as well. So if we could do that in the autumn term, now that would really introduce the pupils to biomimicry as a way of innovation and creation. But also hopefully give you some good feedback in terms of how competent and how your pupils respond to that. And having done that, you might just kind of do that again in the spring term, but do it in more depth, do it in more detail as the pupils get used to what they're doing. Alternatively, in the spring term, you might then start to do that challenge to biology. So you might take an idea from the autumn term. So, well, what other organisms might we research to find and improve our design solution? Or we might work together and think, well, can we identify 3 or 4 challenges which the pupils are interested in each school, and then use a biomimicry approach to solve those challenges? And we can create some age-appropriate resources in terms of research to help them to do that. So that could be a kind of a follow-on in the spring term. Again, building up to the suggestion that in I think it's May 25, we have a design fair where teams of pupils, local community come together and share all their ideas and critique each other's ideas and then add to each other's ideas. So get the idea that, we create one idea, but actually by sharing that and getting everybody to comment on it, we create something far better. The idea that, the best ideas come from collaboration, not necessarily from competition. So we're working together. That big design event. So that's, very rough kind of potential timetable for this. Obviously, I need to know, we need to discuss your timetabling and your kind of, your ways you might want to do that within the school timetabling. I did have a quick look at the curriculum, and I'm just circling lots of areas where this work kind of benefits what you're doing in the curriculum, just to kind of show that, we're doing something which is hopefully building upon some of the core competencies and skills within the curriculum that you have to teach anyway. So this isn't, we're not asking you to take time away from your teaching to do something different. This should all be supporting what you're doing anyway. And again, I was just looking at particular links in particular subject areas, especially the world around us. There's lots of links with some of this work that you might want to use or build upon with what we're doing, depending upon how you're delivering this within each of your schools. So just to kind of reassure you that this isn't kind of completely outside of the curriculum. And then, yeah, I just wanted to leave you some questions, really. So firstly, what you've just heard today, comments and questions, anything that seems clear, unclear, the challenges you anticipate. Does this feel like, wow, that's a huge ask? Or does it feel like, I could get started, there's enough to get me going? I like what you did this morning, and maybe we need a bit more training down the line. Does it feel like something you're interested in? And critically from my side is, what do you need? How can we resource you to do this in terms of lesson plans, activities, more training, help, support? That's really what myself and Nicola are here to support you with. So I'm going to stop the sharing and just pause and just see, any feedback, comments at this stage. Anybody ready to run off or ready to embrace this and give it a go? And does it feel like valuable work with your pupils and your schools?
I think Richard seems very, very valuable. I still find once I'm on the meeting, and same as last time, I feel I've started to get the grips with it, and then like a day or two later, I'm like, I still don't think I've anywhere near enough to go with it with my children. However, that first activity of to bringing something in from nature and then showing the grid on the screen with the 20 plus options on it and trying to get that, I think for like even my P67, I could probably use something like that. So I think it's maybe resources and little lesson ideas of how you can get it started, probably more so. I find it hard to see the bigger picture without getting the little small steps in place beforehand, you know. But no, very, very good. Obviously very informative. But just it's still probably not right etched into my head. I've definitely a bit more of an idea of it today when you were speaking and when Nicola was speaking. It was like I kind of get it a wee bit more than I did last time. But I think the simple, easy to use resources to get the children involved will also help me as a teacher of my class, because then I'll feel more comfortable with it if it's straightforward to follow.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've started kind of big and working down, so it all fits, so the activities fit into a plan. And what I hope to do in May is bring a kind of a resource kind of scheme of work for those first two stages. Probably get that to you beforehand, and then we can sit down and talk about that.
Perfect.
So that as a scheme of work with the activities and say, okay, does this kind of work for you? And is this kind of the sorts of resourcing that is going to work for you? So we kind of get it, when we meet in May, we get down to that very practical, how we can deliver this level.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. Anybody else want to kind of jump in? Any comments or feedback at this stage?
I think it's really good this morning, Richard. Thanks very much. And thanks, Nicola, as well. It's great. And having those resources, all teachers, having something to hand that you can refer back to, and also having the knowledge there that you're not talking that I think this is how it works, or I know it. You can go, well, this is fact, this is what's been done. Would definitely help out. I suppose thinking towards the end of it as well, I would find from primary school perspective, getting that kind of a prototype together, having the resources and the things in school to be able to produce something in the end, you know, support with that would be good, whether it's looking at engineering firms or people around that can help us out, or looking towards secondary schools or technical colleges. You know, the technology departments can help you. Just if you got to the point where you had a really good idea, the kids have done loads of research, and in primary school you're going to make it out of card and paper mache or something, is maybe not, you know. So it's having those resources we wouldn't have in school, just to kind of get, obviously not an amazing prototype that's it's going to be all singing, all dancing, but something that's going to kind of reflect the work they've put in behind it.
I think part of that's about selecting the right challenge that can be prototyped. So that keeping buildings cool, you can definitely test out different installation properties. You could build a model of that and show it. So some challenges are quite abstract, but with this age range, something very tangible like that challenge of keeping the classroom cool in hot weather, you could definitely test out different materials from nature, from human materials, and you could prototype that quite easily. I guess another tip, if you're doing that kind of going and looking at things in nature and look at the functions. If you've got a biology teacher or a science specialist teacher in the school, or the local forest ranger, you might want them in on that day, because to me, you don't need to name things, but I know people like to know the name of things. So it's not about going totally down that naming things route, but sometimes you like to put a name on something. So some of those sessions, if you've got a science specialist, that might be helpful, or might give you more confidence if you're from a social studies background or an arts background.
Just to also say, James said we're setting up an advisory group for the overall Forest Did It First project, and we have a Queen's link in the sense of Professor of Architecture, and then also a biologist. And Paul Caplet, who's a biologist, was very open to connecting students, master's students. There's potential there as well, but those resources externally, and also the architecture. So there's definitely, I think that would be really interesting to kind of build those relationships both locally and wider.
Yeah, get a biology student to come in, help with some of the taxonomy, especially if they're from the ecology side. Great, brilliant. Any other kind of
great, thanks.
Oh, good. Any other comments? Oh, am I still? Oh, no. Sorry, still sharing my screen. So again, as we're kind of running out of time, I will share this with you, and I'm very happy. It'd be great to get more feedback. The plan when we're with you in May might do a few more outdoor activities, but also I hope to kind of go through a more detailed scheme of work for those first 2 stages with you, with some exemplar activities, and just get you to interrogate those and say, well, how do you feel about that? And does that give you enough information? What more do you need for you to be able to be confident to have a go at delivering some of these? And as I said at the very beginning, very open to getting direct feedback on all this. So don't. I'm from Yorkshire, so be quite direct and honest. It's really helpful for me to have that, and then I can find the resources and produce things for you. But that's the idea in May. So by May, you look at some of the actual teaching resources and you go, oh yeah, I'm feeling I'm more confident. And you can study those and maybe prepare for doing some delivery in the autumn time. Great. So with time in mind, I'm going to hand over to Karen, who's I think has got a few administrative and wider project things to talk about. Is that correct?
Just really quickly, do people still have 5 minutes? Yeah. Just to quickly remind that the day or the half day with Richard and Nicola is the 22nd of May. I hope that's still okay for everyone. So 10 to 12 finished with lunch, if people can stay on for lunch. But just reminding everyone, it's the 22nd of May. The other thing, just quickly, that the similar process that's happening with the schools around the youth design process with the support of Nicola and Richard is happening at a community level. So there will be a group in Billiran, Glenallen, Moneydig and Gava, who will be going through that same process around a community challenge and just starting to explore that if we start looking at the rest of the natural world with that different lens, we might start to think about challenges differently. And one of the groups was, for example, talking about the challenge of sharing information. You know, that thing, I put up the posters, but no one came to my event, and so they're beginning to think about that's the challenge they're facing as a community, where how does information get shared in the rest of the natural world, and can that help us look at this differently? So there might be connections between the community process and the schools process as we kind of move forward with this. So I think it's been open to all those different relationships and connections that might emerge out of this. So really quickly, over the next couple of weeks, it's building up towards the launch of the Forest Did It First project, which is with the Big Telly Theatre Company on the 24th, 25th of May, so that week. And I suppose just checking in with all of you about supporting a couple of things. So one of them is the Nature's Got Talent community and schools vote. And I'm going to show you a 1-minute video now. So there's been a whole process of shortlisting 12 species from the air and the fields and the forests and the waters. And we're going to put it out to the schools, the children and the community to vote on which of those species could we learn most from. So it's a bit of fun, a bit of playfulness, and getting people to start thinking about the rest of the natural world as teaching us. So I'm going to show you the video, and we're hoping to perhaps get it out next week, and whether each of the schools could get all the children to vote. It's a simple kind of voting page, so we can kind of chat through the practicalities, but whether you can also put it out to parents to really kind of get that sense of playfulness and people starting to think about looking at the rest of the natural world differently. So I'm just going to show you, it's a draft 1 minute video, and hope it's going to work. Can everyone see that okay? Yeah? Okay.
Welcome to the first ever Nature's Got Talent show, where you will have the opportunity to vote for the most talented species in nature, those from whom us humans could certainly learn a thing or two. We will be shining a spotlight on the often overlooked creatures that inhabit the rivers, forests, fields and skies surrounding Garvagh Forest. There are 12 species, each with a unique talent. These species are divided into 4 categories: fields, forests, waters and air. Head over to the Forest Did It First page at harescornercooperative.com, where you can find loads of fantastic information and brief introductions on each of the species and what makes them unique. Then cast your vote for your favourite in each category. So grab your pen and paper, get ready to take notes, and let's get started. Let's find out if nature's got talent.
Okay, so that's the draft video, and then the just going to quickly show you the voting page. So it will be a really simple voting page with just the welcome, and then just taking you through the categories where they need to. So this is not going to move on. Oh yeah, so the first one would be, which of these do you think can teach us the most as humans in the fields category? So it's hare, hedges and earthworm. We're being a little bit fluid in terms of hedges being a species, but in the sense of playfulness. And then it'll take you through the next category in terms of rivers and the water. So people have to choose whether it's a salmon or a kingfisher or a dragonfly. And then the third category will be the forest. So people choose whether the oak or the bluebell and the dandelion. And then the last one will be the air. So at the end of the voting, we'll have 4 species that everyone's had a bit of thinking and voted as these are the 4 species that we feel we will learn the most of as children and as a community. And then those species will be part of the big tele launch on the 24th, 25th of May. I think we had already said it's going to be framing as an apprenticeship fair. So those species are running an apprenticeship fair and they need humans as apprentices to learn about the jobs that the rest of the natural world does, because they're struggling a bit with those jobs and they need humans to learn some new skills and some new kind of confidences to support them in those jobs. So it'll be playfulness, there'll be a bit of theatre and starting to look at how do we think about the rest of the natural world differently, and it will be at the school site. So it'd be great if we kind of get it out next week in terms of the voting, Nature's Got Talent, whether the children could vote. Again, I'm not sure practically how that could work. It's a really simple kind of link. And then if you can get it out to all the parents and that sense of, yeah, let's just get it all involved and a bit of fun, and it should only take about a minute to do. Does that sound okay? Yeah? Okay. Is the video okay? Does it, just any quick feedback? Because literally it landed in my WhatsApp this morning. Chris Heath, who's a member of the cooperative, has been spending the last 24 hours pulling that together. So does it strike the right tone in terms of creating a little bit of interest and a bit of curiosity and play?
Yeah, video looks good, Karen.
Yeah, okay. So I'll get that out to you next week. Final thing then, really quickly, we had also talked about the Outdoor Classroom Day, which lands on the 23rd of May, and whether we could use that day in each of the schools to have a little bit of celebration of Outdoor Classroom Day, but an introduction to biomimicry and the project. So I suppose some of the ideas around that is that we could tie into with the eco committees and perhaps have a session with the eco committees beforehand to have a quick chat about how we could organize that morning or the couple of hours, whatever. I don't know if anyone is thinking about doing something already about Outdoor Classroom Day, but to have the eco committees perhaps helping and planning. There might be a special assembly that the eco committee could kind of help, just that sense of learning from nature. Some of the activities during the morning we could kind of suggest and think through. One could be a really simple BioBlitz, tying in with the iNaturalist platform that we're really trying to push out. Lucy, I don't know if you want to say anything about the iNaturalist.
Yeah, so the iNaturalist element is what I'm leading on with the project. So iNaturalist is just a app that can be downloaded that will help people record species in the catchment area of Forest did it first. So Garver and the outlying primary school. So we're just trying to engage with the community and hopefully with you guys in the schools just to get people using the app and sort of just show them how simple it is just to take a photo. The app will suggest what species it is, but actually that feeds into, you know, actual scientific data because the species are verified by, you know, actual scientists. So it actually does end up going to record centres, and you know, as part of that, we'll find out what species we've got in our area, and if we've got, the idea is we know better how to care for it, and you know, you can keep an eye on, you know, what species might be disappearing or flourishing.
So I don't know if anyone's ever used the iNaturalist and can kind of send you the link, but there's a project page up there covering the catchment area. And then as Lucy was saying, for each school, if you did a BioBlitz during that day, you could then load up with the iPad, load up the observations onto iNaturalist, and then it becomes a record. So it's a record for the whole area, but then you can drill it down to the record for the school. So each year, each season, you can see what's happening, what's changing, what's appearing. You know, something kind of bloomed last year. This time it's blooming later this year. So it starts to build up that kind of database of knowledge. So that could be one activity, a really simple BioBlitz during that day. There could also be a scavenger hunt with a biomimicry twist, which Richard has sent some resources around. We also, the Tuber Tuesday men's group is making a planter for each of the schools. So it's connecting to a local men's group, and they will be learning from nature. And we're getting lots and lots of free seeds from the seed libraries across Northern Ireland. And so there could be something about the children planting seeds, and perhaps each child going away with a little seed packet to then plant. And so there'll be something around that we can kind of do as well. So it was just to check in with everyone without overwhelming. Is it still good to do something around the Outdoor Classroom Day and a couple of really simple ideas? We could also there'd be potentially kind of give £100 budget to each of the eco committees, and they can kind of decide how they might wish to spend. It could be a wider conversation with all the children about what could we purchase or do with that £100 that would give back to the natural world around the school. So it could be that kind of conversation. What could we buy? What could we do? It could be really simple gardening equipment, whatever. But it's that question: how could we use this pot of money to give back to the field, the land, the waters, the air around the school? Does that sound okay? Any quick feedback? What would be helpful in terms of next steps like that? And also to say there'll be a couple of members of the cooperative, if helpful, that could be present during that morning. On the 23rd of May, just to kind of help with anything that's happening. So in case you were already thinking about doing things, don't want to land on top, but if some of those activities could weave in and it could be a celebration collectively of Outdoor Classroom Day. Any quick feedback or questions?
It's a great tool to use if you're with pupils and they ask you, what's that called? And you say, well, get your app out and find out for yourself.
I just shared one of the most biodiverse places on the planet was where I actually got locked down, the forest behind me, and the iNaturalist page that I made, really, I mean, it's quite wild to, if you ever want to use that, to have a look at, what does the most biodiverse places on the planet look like, what lives there? And, I mean, it's obviously totally different to where we are, but it just shows also how iNaturalist can be used. And we used it as part of a lawsuit. Actually, we were able to kind of use what was collected, that what lives in that area. So it, it's very multifunctional, and the importance of using iNaturalist.
And we had a spring flowers walk on Saturday before the storms really hit in the forest. And so there was a few people joining a walk, and we recorded 9 new species on the iNaturalist app, and there was 34 new observations, and they're pinpointed, so it's a very visual map. So it's just that real sense of finding new species that you can load up on the map, and you can get a bit of competition going between the schools and so on. So really quick, in terms of the kind of outdoor classroom day, really practically, what would be helpful for each of the schools around organizing it?
I'll get a little chat with Rachel and June, Karen, and then feedback to you, because I know Rachel usually comes up with some wonderful ideas for outdoor classroom day.
Brilliant. And Rachel and I have been chatting about this as well, so that'd be great, Kieran.
Yeah.
James, you're on mute, or at least can't hear you.
Any help is always welcome. I think we have slight difficulty on the 23rd. We have a show on that night, but we'll be able to do something, and maybe do something bigger in the next week after that. But definitely having, if somebody was able to come and visit us and share knowledge, is always good.
Okay, so even a really simple bio blitz or something with one of the classes?
Yeah, definitely.
Perfect.
It'd be great as well, Karen, if we could have someone, on either site, maybe.
I asked first, though, Catherine.
Karen said there's more than one, James.
I mean, there's 15 members of the cooperative, so
there we are. You can have 2, James. I'll be
great,
generous.
thanks.
We can have the rest. No, it'd be great to have some help. And we've also got the file full of fantastic classroom outdoor lessons as well. So I'll definitely be digging into that too. So
brilliant.
Can I help?
That's great. Gillian, any terms of from GAVA?
Yeah, we would be happy to have somebody with us as well. I'm not sure if I will be in that day. I don't teach normally. I only teach 4 days a week, but we'll get something sorted, definitely. Yeah, we'll do something.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. And sure, I'll be in touch with everyone just in terms of kind of what you have capacity for, and what we can kind of do in terms of activities. Okay. Brilliant. Thank you. I think whilst we said we were going to finish closer to 11, at least you had 11:30 in your diaries, and we're bang on time. So thank you, everyone, for coming along. Really appreciate it. Remember, subcover is available, and a massive thanks to Richard and Nicola as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Richard and Nicola.
Thanks, Richard, Nicola. Thanks, Karen.
Pleasure. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye,
Take
everyone.
care.